Welcome to part 2 of the design course. Now we're going to shift our attention to building application UI, specifically an admin dashboard. All applications need an admin dashboard, and dashboards form a large part of most applications. So let's have a look at the demo app and go through what we're building. So the current width we're looking at is 1440. We can see that it fills most of the screen real estate. If I had to go one size larger to 2560, you can see that the design is still in the center. Okay, it's not left aligned, it's not right aligned, but it's in the center. More realistically, the latest Apple Pro Mac is, I think, 1600, or around about there. So that's what it would look like. We have a fixed floating group on the left-hand side where a user can navigate to different views, and we're building this on a single page. So you can click through to your users, analytics, but we're just going to be building this home section. Because what you learn from this home section, you can apply to different views. Now I mentioned that this is fixed on the left-hand side. It's also fixed top to bottom, meaning that if we scroll on the page, this doesn't scroll, okay? It stays or it persists to its current location. The same goes for the nav bar across the top. Now I've actually specifically designed this dashboard so that it can be mobile responsive, but this is up to you to decide if you want a mobile responsive admin dashboard or a user dashboard. Most dashboards lend themselves to a much sort of more crowded UI, more data, tables, things that don't look that good on mobile. And for instance, if you take Stripe payments as an example, they have a desktop app that I keep pinned in my browser on a day-to-day basis. I have a look. But then also when I'm out, they have an app, the Stripe app, which is far more simpler and is redesigned for mobile. I did actually want to go through the exercise of making this mobile responsive just so you can see my thought process and my design choices to enable that this also looks good on mobile. Okay. So let's bring this down to 1024. You can see that the left-hand navigation bar has dropped away. All right, if we bring it down to mobile sizes, it looks slightly different. Everything is stacked top to bottom. I've removed the email addresses from these users just because there actually isn't enough space. If you wanted to see email addresses, what I would do is have these rows clickable to show a pop-up or another screen where you can see more information. But the main point here is that you don't want to overcrowd your designs. You just want the most important bits of data available on mobile. To bring the floating group navigation back, we'll click on this icon here, that'll bring it back. Then we'd change our view, okay? Now you'll notice again that I've specifically chosen to not have any color in this dashboard. Everything is black, gray, and white. But you could have accent color. For instance, your brand color could be when this button state is selected, and maybe on the iconography as well. But in terms of dashboards, you don't want to make them too distracting. You just want the most important information to be easily viewable and accessible. Then down in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got your own account, and we've got a little more info button here where you could build out further menus if you'd like. So the first thing we're going to do is just focus on layout. Let me reiterate, beautiful UI design is really about layout, spacing, and sizing. You get that right, and you're more than halfway there. So we're going to add two floating groups, one on the left and one across the top. Then we're going to have a container in the center that is scrollable, and we're going to divide this container into its respective parts. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new page. You can call it dashboard. Go ahead and create that. I'm double clicking to bring up the property editor. I'm going to call this dashboard surface. And on the layout tab, I'm going to make this a column and 1200 width. Can leave the default height to whatever it is set currently. Now for the left-hand navigation floating group. Let's head over to the containers section, find our floating group, and just drop it on the page for now. Let's rename this navigation. I tend to leave the name of the container there so I know what it is. If I just type navigation, it wouldn't be obvious if it's a group or floating group, okay? And they have different properties. This will be fixed width, guys, so it doesn't matter what the width of the screen is or the browser. It needs to be, let's say, 280 or perhaps 240. This isn't an exact science. This is just a creative choice. I'm going to uncheck fit height to content, so it spans full height of the page. And on the appearance tab, what I'd like to do is add a new background color. This is currently set to a surface. Let's head over to the styles tab and to style variables. So we've got basically two whites here. We've got a primary contrast, and then we've got another one called background. I want to adapt this background to be a light gray. Let's make it F7, F7, F7. Okay. So let's actually set the background on the dashboard to this new background color. There you go. Which means now we can make this floating group just white. And let's add a border on the right-hand side. So I've checked define each border independently. I'm going to find border right solid. And then I'm going to select my border color, gray light. Fantastic. Let's preview the page. I've removed the debugger bar. You can do the same. And here we go, nice and neat. Let's now add a floating group header across the top. So let's grab another floating group in the containers section, drop it on the page. Going to rename this to header. Going to change the color to white. And in fact, we can just edit the style as well to be white for future purposes. Okay, I want this to be a fixed height, so I'm going to go across to the fixed height and choose 80 pixels, just a creative choice. And then I'm going to uncheck fixed width because it will never be fixed width, and then remove the min width as well. Now you can see some overlap happening here, okay? Some overlap. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to add a bottom border to this floating group header. So on the appearance tab, scrolling down, finding define each border independently. I'm going to choose a border style of solid for the bottom and change it to our gray light. Okay, now we can clearly see the overlap happening. So what we need to do is this. I actually want my floating group header to start over here. Okay, and the way to achieve that is to simply just add some left margin. The left margin needs to be the same width as the floating group header, which is currently 240. So head over to the layout tab on floating group header, and let's add 240 left margin. Nice and neat. Okay, now let's talk about the actual content area. I'm going to go back to the demo app. And I'm going to head over to the design. Let's have a look at the anatomy first of all. I'm going to close this all down. Okay, so at page level, we have a group container. Okay, this is it over here, group container. And let's have a look at the margin on this, because much like we added 240 margin on the floating group header, we're going to do the same for this group container. So this is the most parent group on the page itself. Remember, we don't design on the page ever. We always have to put down groups which act as containers that contain our UI. So it has a top margin of 80, so it starts beneath this floating group, and a left margin of 240, so it starts to the right-hand side of the floating group. If we didn't do that, then the content would sit underneath, because these are floating groups. So these have a z-axis of more than 0, okay? So they're above the content. That's why we need this margin. And then we just have some neat padding of 64 at the top, left, right, and bottom of 32. And you can see that the content at the top here, the card revenue, starts at the same y-axis as the admin here, okay? Just keeping everything nice and neat. So that would be the group container. And regardless of whether we're clicking on Home, Users, Analytics, group container is going to remain on the page. But then we have another group inside, and that would be the group Home. So these are the ones that are collapsed when hidden, and these are the ones that we would show if we click on these navigation links. So if I click on Group tab User, then I would hide Group Home, and I'd show a Group User. And we'll talk through the best strategy for this. And then within Group Home, I have a group up here, some group columns, and then I have some group tables down here. Now inside Group Home, I have some row gap, but inside these group columns, I have some nice and even column and row gap as well. Okay. So let's grab a group from the container section, just drop it on the page, and let's go to the Layout tab and uncheck Fit Width to Content, and then uncheck Fit Height to Content as well. Now let's just make sure we can see what we're doing. So let's go to the Appearance tab, and let's change the background style to a flat color. Let's choose maybe a blue color. You know what we're going to do here, guys. Just change this to 10%. Okay, so we can see what we're doing. Let's rename this to Group Container, topmost group, and now let's add our margins on the Layout tab. So it sits to the right of Floating Group, Nav, and underneath the Floating Group header. So margin left, 240, margin top, 80. Brilliant. Now remember that we have padding inside this as well. Some global padding, so 64 at the top, 32, 32, 32, 4-point system. These could have been 48 at the top, 24, doesn't matter. This is just my system that works quite nicely. Brilliant, and this is always going to be viewable, okay? We'll change this back to transparent in a second. But now let's grab another group and drop it inside Group Container. Let's rename this to Group Home. And this will be collapsed and hidden on page load, and we will select when we want to view it. So let's do the same. Let's just add a flat color. Let's grab this color here. And then apply it to Group Home. If you can't see Group Home, you can always find it in the elements tree. Okay, let me bring this down. There it is there. I'm going to add this flat color just because we're doing some nesting here. And guys, I don't always do this, okay? I don't do this at all, but when I'm teaching, it's much easier to show you how nested groups respond. Because what we're actually going to do is make this desktop responsive before we do the actual design. Okay, once you've done that, over in the Layout tab, we can uncheck Fit Width to Content, so it spans edge to edge, and we can uncheck Fit Height to Content, so it heads down to the bottom. We will come back and actually change the setting once we have some UI in here. But for now, this is fine. Okay, so we have those 4 cards across the top. So the first thing we're going to do is grab another group, because now we are organizing the structure of the page. So I'm going to grab a group, drop it in. I'm going to call this Group Cards. And I'm going to do the same thing, guys. I'm going to head to flat color, paste in that blue color, change it to 10%. This will be edge to edge. And let's make this about 200 for now, okay? This will obviously change when the cards are in here. And then beneath that, we had some tables. So I'm going to save myself some time just by duplicating this content and changing this to group tables. And for group tables, I'm going to uncheck fit height to content and just let that fill the rest of the space. Now, I don't want these groups touching each other. I want some gap spacing. So I'm going to apply the gap spacing on group home. For this, you'll need to head to the elements tree, find group home, because it's sitting behind these group cards. Then apply some gap spacing of 20. Okay, so we can see things starting to take shape now. Let's preview the page. Okay, excellent. Now what we want to make sure is that we do have a centered column for this group home, okay? Again, if someone's on a large desktop, you don't really want to fill the entire desktop. You want your content to be slightly centered so it's easier to navigate, easier to use, and it's a more predictable layout for you as well. If you didn't have a max width, if you didn't have the column in the center, then your designs might look a little bit messy and not what you expect, and that would be out of your control. Let's take back control and set a max width. Okay, so we can set a max width actually on the group container, the parent group container. Now this could be 992, you wouldn't really go less than that. It could be 1200, could even be 1400, depending on what you're building, guys. That's up to you. We're going to split the difference and just do a 1200 max width. Okay, let's preview, see what happened. Okay, so it's pulling to the left now. That's fine, let's change that. I'm going to go to horizontal alignment on group container, set that in the center. Let's preview. All right, nice and neat. So I'm going to show you the demo app because there's something I want to point out in terms of making the cards responsive that are going to go into this group. Okay, so we've got 4 cards, all right? So I'm going to bring this down. And notice that now, instead of 4 cards, we have 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. Now this is because I'm grouping the cards. I'm grouping, if we look at total revenue and subscriptions, let me bring this back. Total revenue and subscriptions. So I'm keeping them in a group, and then I'm keeping the sales and churns in their own group as well. I'm doing this because if I didn't, what would happen is we would have 3 cards across the top, and then churns would be across the bottom, which I don't want. I want a nice, even layout. And then when we break down further, get down here, then we have single columns. Back to 2, back to 4. Okay. So now I need to grab another group, drop it inside group cards. This will just be called group col for column. Actually, let's just type out column. I'm going to let that span edge to edge, and then I'm going to duplicate it in a second. So just let it span edge to edge first of all. And I want you to click back on group cards because this needs to now be a row layout. Okay, row layout, group cards. Once you've done that, let's go to the appearance and let's do the same thing again. Let's just apply some blue with 10% opacity. And after this we'll be done and we can start working on the UI, folks. Okay, on group layout, I'm going to choose vertical alignment and let it vertically stretch. Okay, now I'm just going to duplicate group column, and it's going to put another column next to it because its parent group cards is set to a row layout. There it is there next to it. Okay, I can just remove the copy. There we go. And then inside these groups, we would have our cards. Okay, those 4 cards would have 2 in here and then 2 in here, which means these need to be a row layout. So row layout and group column left, and then on the right we have a row layout as well. And I'm going to set some gap spacing on the group cards just to push these 2 groups apart slightly. So on group cards, we have a gap spacing of 20. And when we get down to mobile responsive, we also need to set a row gap because these columns will then stack on top of each other. I'm going to choose 20 so I'm going to choose 20 now. You obviously can't see anything because it's currently in a row layout, and that will switch to a column layout naturally. Okay, one more preview and then we'll get started by adding some detail. All right, looking really good. Floating group at the top. This scrolls independently of the side moving, which is fixed into position. And this is the layout that we're after. Okay, and I think what I'd like to do, folks, is I would like to just push on with responsive. I think it's actually easier to demonstrate when we're just looking at colored blocks on the screen. So let's see how far we can get to spend the next 10 minutes making this mobile responsive. Okay, so if I hit responsive now, and I hit 1200, we can see our design doesn't do anything. 992. If we did have our cards in here, they'd be very, very squishy. Okay, so we actually want a breakpoint at 1200. At 1200, what I want to happen is I want this left-hand floating group to actually disappear altogether. And then I want this group container to fill the remaining space. So in fact, at 1200 or below 1200, this group container will be full width of the page. We'll remove this left-hand margin. Okay, so let's do this. On floating group navigation, let's head over to the conditional tab. Let's define a condition that says when the page width is less than 1200, type it with my keyboard, and then I'm going to select desktop 1200 as a breakpoint. I'm going to say this element is visible, and then I'm going to remove the check mark. Okay, so now if I bring this handle down, we're currently at 1200. If I bring the handle down, that disappears. Okay, now it's a floating group. It's a floating group. So what we also need to do is on the group container, we need to apply the same condition. So I'm going to save myself some time by right-clicking on floating group navigation and saying copy special, copy conditional expressions. And then on group container, paste special, paste conditional expressions. Now, instead of hiding group container, we always need that visible. I'm going to remove that. We're going to find the left margin, and then I'm going to remove that margin. Okay, so if we bring the handle down a bit, we can see that now it spans all the way to the sides. But I want the same thing to happen. I want the behavior to be consistent also with this floating group header. So you should have copied conditional expressions from this floating group nav, which means we can now just paste special, paste conditional expressions. And instead of making the element invisible, simply going to remove the left margin. So now it spans edge to edge, nice and neat. Perfect. Let's preview the page as well. So guys, go ahead and right-click and inspect if you're using a Chrome or Chromium browser. I've just undocked my developer tools, and I'm going to choose 1024, and there you go. Now there is more work to be done here. Obviously, we've got 2 cards here, 2 cards here, we've got tables that need to stack. For that, we do actually need those elements designed. So we'll continue with responsive a little bit later on. Okay, so time to have some fun. Let's start designing our floating group nav on the left, and then we'll do our nav across the top, and things will start to take shape. Let's review the demo app. So let's have a look at the anatomy of this. We've got our floating group navigation. Perfect. It looks like we have a group at the top with some left-right padding, and that's where our icon is going to be. That icon you'll be able to find in the description in the assets folder. Then we have a group nav links, and then it looks like we have two more groups inside, and there is a bottom border dividing them neatly. And then across the bottom, we have a group account section. Now on this navigation floating group, our container layout is actually on the very right-hand side. We have a space between, much like when we have row space between, which you'll find up here. We can also have column space between. So this space between, if I just collapse these groups in the element tree, here is our floating group navigation. So we do have a group holding all of this stuff at the top, and then our group account at the bottom. And to push those apart, we use space between. Let's get building. Okay, why don't we just go ahead and remove all of the color from these groups. We can always see the structure in our layers section in the elements tree. Okay, let's grab an image, drop that in. Go ahead and upload the image in your assets folder. All right, over in the layout tab, let's make this 40 width and then keep aspect ratio fixed. Okay, fantastic. Let's rename this to image icon. Now I'm going to right click on image icon, group elements in a, well, it doesn't matter, it could be row or a column. Let's set this to row. That's group icon. Now I want to make this the same height as the floating group header, which is 80 pixels tall. Okay, so group icon, I'm going to set a fixed height of 80. I'm going to uncheck fit with content, and then I'm going to set 24 padding left right. All right, and then the last thing I want to do is I'm going to click on group image icon and then vertically align in the center, which you can find on the layout tab. Okay, that's just where I wanted it. Perfect. Now we need our home nav link. So I'm just going to grab some text first of all, drop it in. Going to say home, then I'm going to find myself an icon, drop it in, search for home under phosphor, maybe house. Yep, find yourself an icon. And on the layout tab, let's make this icon 20 by 20. And on the text, let's actually drop this down slightly to 14. Now I am going to be overriding quite a lot of styles here, and there's something I want you to understand about the styles. So styles create consistency across your app. Okay, so we have your H1 to H6, body large, medium, small. That creates consistency. What else does it do? Well, there are also H tags associated with these particular styles. That is basically so Google or other search engines can understand some of your content and the importance of your content. Now, for the marketing page, that matters a lot in terms of the H tags. Google cannot log into your dashboard, okay? So H tags are actually irrelevant behind a login, so in this particular instance. But style consistency is very important. For the sake of this course, I'm going to be adapting some of the styles slightly because dashboard UI or application UI is a little bit different to sort of marketing UI. Marketing marketing tends to be louder, bolder, larger buttons, larger inputs, which is great, rounded buttons. But in a dashboard, I'd most likely use more squarer or rectangular buttons, slightly smaller text, just so I can fit a little bit more and I can get a bit more flexibility out of some of these elements. So we are going to be overriding some of the styles. Now, you could go ahead, detach the style, you could design it. So actually the font color is going to be our dark gray. And on this icon, it's also going to be a dark gray to begin with. And then you could save this as a new style. So this could be add a new style, dash body. So any body text in the dashboard, we use that particular style. Okay. Now let's highlight both of the icon and the text. By the way, these labels exist because in my view, I have show element labels. Because we're going to be micro adjusting a lot in this dashboard, I'm actually going to remove show element labels. Now I'm going to group elements in a row container because they need to be next to each other. And I'm going to rename this to group tab home. Okay, I'm going to detach the style. We're going to create a new style shortly. But for now, I'm going to make a brownness of 8. The background style is going to be a flat color and white to begin with. We're going to conditionally change that once it's clicked. On the layout tab, I'm going to choose edge to edge. No min width, but I am going to set a fixed height here because the height will never change. It's always going to be 44 pixels in height. That's a creative choice. Let's add some left-right padding. Top-bottom padding doesn't matter because we've got a fixed height. Let's add 12 and 12. Okay, let's arrange this content nice and neatly. So on home, I'm going to click next, and then I'm going to vertically align in the center. And then on the icon, I'm going to vertically align in the center. And now we need a bit of space between these two elements. So if we click back on group tab home, we can then apply some gap spacing. Let's choose 12. Okay. So this home, let's just have a look at some of the styling here. So we have this dark gray, which is quite dark. I need an unselected state to begin with. So let's go into a dash body and just change the font color to this gray medium to begin with. And let's do the same to the icon. Okay. So our other tabs we had in this particular top section was users and analytics. All right, so I'm going to duplicate once and then duplicate again. Let's go to the second one. Let's change this to users. Change the text to users. And change the icon to a user. Choosing the fifth one along, phosphor. Okay, one below that is analytics. We all need analytics in our app. If we don't have analytics, we don't actually know what's going on. Change the text to analytics. And let's find a chart element here. So let's choose the first one. All right, going up, things are looking good. Now, I don't want these, basically we can call them buttons really. I don't want these touching sort of the edge of my floating group. So I'm going to highlight all three. Please do the same. Right click, group elements in a column container. You can just call this nav links. And then on the layout tab, I want that edge to edge. And then what I'm going to do is scroll down to padding, and I'm going to choose 12 and 12. Okay, these numbers aren't just randomly thought up. If we look at the left padding, you have 24 pixels. Well, this icon will also be 24 pixels because we have 12 padding left and right inside this group tab home. Then we have 12 pixels on group nav links, which means that when this has a background color, it's nice and neat, it's not touching the edges. Again, a creative choice. You could have it touching the edges if you wanted to. Okay, so with that done, we need another one. Okay, so I'm just going to duplicate group nav links, create another one. You can keep the naming convention the same. And in here, I'm after sales, transactions, and churn. So let's say sales for the first one. Change the text to sales. And then maybe this can be maybe like a card. Yep, that works. Next one can be transactions. Basically the same thing. Doesn't matter. We're just designing, guys. And for this, maybe some money of some sort. Maybe this little wavy guy down here. Back on phosphor, regular, and I'm choosing this money wavy. And then the last one I mentioned was churn. Churn is a very important measure in a SaaS business. Basically, how many people have unsubscribed in the month. And for that, we need a chart element, but a negative chart element. So maybe this guy over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across is called chart line down. Okay, looking really, really good. Let's just sort out some of the spacing here. So first of all, head over to your elements tree and let's just collapse a few things just so we can see the structure here. So we have the group icon, nav link, and nav link. Okay, let's put all of these in their own group as well. Right click, group elements in a column container. Call this top container. Then on the layout tab, uncheck fit width to content. Fantastic. Now I'm going to apply some, let me think here. Let's apply some gap spacing of 64. Okay, because we have, what is the spacing here actually? Yeah, we have 64. So you can see that it's going to start on the same x-axis. But these two are too far away. So let me add on group nav links, on the top group nav links, go ahead and add some bottom padding of 24. And then let's add a line underneath. So let's define each border independently on the top group nav links. That exposes the ability to add a bottom border of our gray light. Then we need to bring this back slightly. So to do that, let's take these two group nav links and put them in their own parent container of a column. You can just call the nav links as well. And on the layout tab, uncheck fit width to content. Okay, and now to create some even spacing, I'm going to add some top padding, 24. There you go, nice even spacing. Now we did have just some little text up here. So let's grab a text element, drop it inside group nav link. Let me show you actually a neater way to do this. So in the elements tree, just expose the group nav link so we see these two sort of nested nav links. Then grab some text and just drag it in. There you go. Pressing all caps, I'm going to type in admin. And let's make this 10 pixels in height or in size. Let's change it to a medium so we can actually see it. Maybe let's add some letter spacing of 1. And now I wanted to start where this icon is. Okay, and this icon is 24 pixels from the left. And this is 12 pixels from the left. Okay, so to do that, head over to the layout tab. We just need to add some left margin, 24. And then that lines up neatly top to bottom. And then I would just want some margin beneath it as well. So maybe 12 beneath it. Yeah, I like that. So let's do the same. Let's say copy. And then I'm going to close this group nav link, go to the next one. And then I'm going to paste. Let's see where it puts it at the bottom. Now I can just use my keyboard to bring it to the top. And this is called the sales. Very nice. Really, really liking that. Now we need our little section at the bottom. Now don't forget we want to now change the floating group navigation on the layout to space between. And we can do that because we created this topmost container. So now if we put in another element on this floating group navigation, it will be automatically be pushed to the bottom. So I'm going to grab an image and watch it go to the bottom. Well, let's first make it, 48 pixels, and there we go. Aspect ratio 1:1. On the Appearance tab, I want to make this at least 24 roundness, so it's a perfect circle. And guys, you can go ahead and upload your own image, or you can upload my image if you want to see me in your dashboard as well. Okay, there I am. So that would be the current user basically. Now I'm going to grab some text, drop it in as well. You can type your own name here, you can type my name, up to you. But I'm going to make that a bit smaller. Like I mentioned, I need slightly smaller text in a dashboard, and then I'm going to use 500. Now we've got space between. We've got space between, and this is in the center because the way space between works is it applies even space between the elements. To have a top to bottom design, we can only have 2 elements. So we need to group these together. And we're going to group these together in a row container. There we go. This is group user, and on the layout tab, remove fit width to content. And let's put the image on the left-hand side. And let's put the Gregory John in the center. And then in group user, let's add some padding. So first of all, let's add some top padding of maybe 40 for the top. And then bottom padding, let's try 20. And then left, right of 24 and 24. Actually, we can do 12 and 12. Yeah, we can do 12 and 12. That's fine. And I want a bit of a divider here. So let me just think here. I'm actually going to choose to do something slightly different here. So what do we got up here? 20. All right, let's just make this even 20. And then let's, on the Parents tab, I want a line at the top. So I'm going to expose the independent borders through define each border independently. And then I'm going to choose a solid border on the top. There you go. Okay, now we need a bit of gap spacing because the elements are touching. Let's choose 12 on the column. And maybe add my email address here as well. I'm going to duplicate that content. Let me type in an email address, pretend one. And I'm going to make this a dark gray. Now on the layout tab, please go ahead and remove fit width to content on the text, and then do the same on the Gregory John as well, or your name. Do the same. Okay, that's better. But I want these 2 pieces of text in a column layout. Okay, so highlight both of them, right click, group elements in a column container. Then we can move fit width to content on that as well. Let's now push the name to the top. And you can see that the email is quite long. Okay, it's not quite fitting. So let's talk through some options here. First of all, we can change this to slightly less size. Okay, 12 pixels. And this is where it does become a bit of a design choice. We can't really fit in. I don't really want to go beneath 12 pixels because it's hard to read. So I'm going to change the size of this image user. Bring this down to 40. Okay, still a bit cramped. 36, 32. What else can we do here? Maybe we can reduce the column gap to 8. And there we go. So you've basically seen that this is just a creative choice I've made. I've gone for quite a long email address example, but when I'm collecting email addresses, you know, I get to see what they are. Some of them are really long. In fact, much longer than this. So we could maybe truncate the email address, or we could just choose not to show an email address. We don't want to force the design. We want it to be natural. So if the email address naturally feels awkward or doesn't fit, just remove it. It doesn't work. And let's talk through how we would be able to see someone's email address in this instance. Okay, so this just works. I'm going to take this image and put it in the center vertically. And let's just say that I'm going to make this email address a bit shorter. But the other option that we could have done here is add an icon. Maybe add an icon inside the group that's holding the text. Let me type the word more, vert. All the icon libraries have different names for these things. Okay, vert, that works. Add these 3 dots here. Let's change this to 24 by 24. Now I want you to group the name and the dots together. I'm going to put those in a row layout. And you will recognize this type of design. Then remove the fit width to content. And you will see these dots all the time. Use your keypad to push to the right-hand side. And then we'll talk through what to do here in a second. But you would have seen these dots. So when you're designing, think about how the dashboards that you currently use in your day-to-day life, think about how they solve some of these design challenges. So these 3 dots usually means that there is a menu or more options. And that's how we would do it. Then we'd have maybe a group focus or a pop-up to show more about the logged in user or whatever the situation is that you're designing for. But what I want here is, let me put that in the center. Does that do much? Okay, looking good. Now we can remove the min height. It's currently called group Q. I don't like that. Let's say name there. And also we had a random group P here. Let's just say text. Let's have a look. Yeah, I think that works. I think that does work. All right, what about across the top? Let's first preview the demo app. So it looks like we have just a little bit of text here with a search box on the right-hand side. Okay, so we have a row layout with space between, pushing these 2 items to the other side. Grab some text. Naturally, guys, this would be dynamic text, okay? Actually, what did it say? Okay. Now let's just apply maybe a heading 2 here. That looks a bit big. Heading 3, that looks good. On the layout tab, yeah, that can remain where it is. We can even remove fit width to content. You don't have to, but that's fine. Now floating group header is currently set to a column. We don't want that. We want it set to a row. And on floating group header, I also want 32 pixels left-right padding. It's a fixed height, so we don't need top-bottom padding. And now I can go ahead and put this vertically in the center. And then let's find a search input, search box. Just get that inside. Maybe click left on your keyboard. It's our search box. This could say search. Let's edit the appearance slightly because we haven't actually touched this. So pop-in's perfect. 400. Yeah, this all looks fine. Placeholder text should actually be this dark gray or gray medium. Roundness should be 8. And borders should be our border color, which is gray light. just remove the hover condition. I don't think we need a hover condition. And on the layout tab, we're going to add a bit more left-right padding of 16 and 16. Looking good. Okay, so currently it's a fixed width of 250. Let's just bring this down to 240 and put this vertically in the center. And I think that's all we really need to do. Look at that, looking really good. Maybe bring this down to 44, just so it's the same height as these. Trust me, users do notice these little changes. I prefer things to be nice and consistent. This text feels quite marketing-ish. Let's maybe try that. And then also just reduce, override, choose semi-bold. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, guys, time to preview. So this is where we left off. Let's go to 1440. Excellent, looking really, really good. Okay, I want to set up the workflow here. So we're going to use what are called page parameters here, page params. We're going to set a parameter of home, and then we're going to use that parameter to show and hide the relevant groups here. So let's add a workflow. And we're just simply going to go to navigation, go to page. I'm going to go to the same page because we're not actually going to a page. We just want to send more parameters. I'm going to add a parameter. This could be named anything I like. This will show up in the URL bar at the top. I'm going to say v equals, we type home in lowercase. Lowercase just so it's easier to remember. It is case sensitive. That's all I'm going to do here. Okay. So that will then set a parameter at the top. Now we can use that parameter to change the design. So in the condition of group tab home, let's say that when get data from page URL, when the parameter v that we've just created, then I can say is, and then I can type in home all lowercase on my keyboard. Instead of hitting enter, I'm just going to click outside the box. Okay, sometimes when you hit enter, it chooses an option from the drop down which we don't want. Then I'm going to type color. Okay, I'm going to change this to our background color of F7, F7, F7. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to copy this expression. I'm going to click on home, paste that in, change the color of this font. Let's change it from gray medium to gray dark. And I also want to change the weight to emphasize that it is currently selected. Let's do the same again. Now in the icon, we want a darker icon when get v from page URL is home. Icon color, make that darker. Okay, so we've got dark icon, dark home, and a light gray background. We can actually go ahead and test this now, guys. Click on home, and you can look in your URL bar. Mine is currently hidden, but you can look in your own, and you'll see at the end it will say $v equals home. Let's just set up one for users, although we're not setting up the view. I just want to show you the distinction. So if we click on Group tab Users, add the workflow, we navigate, go to Page, go to the same page, send more parameters, V, and now Users. I'm not going to set up the rest of the design here because you know what will happen. You know, the styling will change. But if we preview the page is refreshed. This is still highlighted. And this is the distinction between states and page parameters. Could you have used a state here to basically set state of a value and then reference that value to do the same thing? Yeah, sure. But with page parameters, it persists. So if the page is refreshed, not that your users are refreshing your page all the time, but maybe you push an update and they need to refresh the page, well, it will remain in its location. The other thing I like about page parameters is it means that users can click the back and forward button in their browser and it will follow the navigation that they've gone through, or the navigational journey that they've gone through. So if I click on users, it would have changed the style of users. If I click back on home, we can see that we have used the conditions tab to change the style of home. Let's now turn our attention to the 4 cards along the top. What we'll do is design the first card, get that nice and neat, and then all we have to do is just copy and paste for the rest. So let's design this card, total revenue. Let's have a look. So group card revenue, we have flat color, we have a border, 8 in the roundness, and on the layout tab we have 24 pixels of even padding all the way around. Inside we have a group across the top that is in a row layout, space between, that's holding total revenue and an icon. Then we have a group beneath that, and that is just some sort of dummy text, obviously that would be dynamic, and then some more information beneath that. So that card is obviously in a column layout with 12 pixels of row gap. Okay, sounds good. Let's do this. So let's just look at our elements tree and just collapse a few things. Just collapse everything right down so we can have a look at this again. So we've got our group container. Okay, then we've got home. Then we've got our group cards. Perfect. So we want our new group in this one here, group column over here. So let's grab a group. Let's get it inside group column. Let's call this card. And I'm going to detach the style because we're going to create a new one. Let's set a flat color on the background, primary contrast. Let's add a border style with our gray light and 8 on the roundness. On the layout tab, I don't really know the width. Let's just set a width for now, so we have some design space of 240. And the height I also don't know, so maybe 140. And then let's set 24 pixels of padding. Okay, now that we've done that, let's set a style here of card. And naturally, in my own work, I will have card small, card medium, card large, right? The larger the design, the more padding I would have. Smaller the design, the less padding. And our padding sizes tend to be 8, 16, 24, and 32. Those 4 sizes, I never really go above or beneath those sizes. Okay, now for the content. Let's quickly review. So total revenue. I'm just going to copy this number. I like that number. Total revenue. So let's grab some text. Total revenue. And let's make this medium. And again, you could set up a style here if you want to. I'll leave you to do that. Let's find an icon. Looking for a chart element. Maybe that one there will do as well. Let's make this 20 by 20. Now these 2 items, I've highlighted both of them so I can put them in a row layout. And I can remove fit width content, and I can choose space between. I'm going to rename that to group title. So guys, in terms of renaming groups, I tend to just think logically what a group does, but I tend to keep my naming pretty consistent. Okay, if I can't think of a name of something, I don't sit there thinking, what can I name this? Because I can see everything neatly in the elements tree. So a lot of the time I will just name something group row or group container because that might be the layout function that's really useful to me. I'm naming this group title. I can blatantly see it needs to be a row layout, but I could have also named it group row. What I don't like to do is leave groups unnamed. Group QVCI3V, terrible example, but because to me that for my own process, what that is telling me is I might have forgotten to actually style that group or set out the correct layout or remove the min or max width. I change it just to tell myself, signal to myself that I've done some work here. On the layout tab, let's remove the min height. Okay, now we need some text beneath that. Let's get it inside. I'm just going to paste in that big number from earlier. So $24,059.94. For that, I'm just going to pick one of these. Maybe a heading 4 looks quite good, but semi-bold. I don't like using bold in my designs. Okay, and then we need some more text beneath that. And I'm just reminding myself what I said here. Okay, so this is just a little statistic, which is quite nice. I'm going to paste that in because it's less important. Obviously, it's smaller, and I'm also going to change it to a dash body. Okay, there we go. Now we've reused one of the styles, which is great. So in terms of the spacing, we discussed that the group card needed to be a column, which it is. We know that already, but that we need some gap spacing. Let's try 12. Fantastic. And then these two need to be in their own group. Right-click, group elements in a column container. Group stats. And then remove fit width to content. Okay, really, really liking that. Now we need another one inside here, right? We need two in here. So group column is currently set to a row. So if we duplicate group card, it'll sit next to it. But now we do need to adapt the min width. So I'm going to remove the min width first of all. That's step one. So now it's fit width to content is checked, which I want, and it's hugging the content. For now, I'm going to actually remove fit width to content because I want it to naturally fill the available space in here. And it being a bit wider is absolutely fine. So with that highlighted, I'm going to choose on my Mac Command D for duplicate. You can also go Command C, Command V. Let's rename this one to sales. And the one on the left, I'm just going to rename to revenue. Okay, let's design this and then we'll talk about the spacing. So this is going to say sales, total sales. And this will be a number. So add in 4 digits, but we've got lots of space over here to play with, okay? And then maybe we can say 21% up from last month. But you can see that the width is hugging the content. So this card visually feels like it's shorter or not as wide as this card here. So let's highlight both of them, head over to the layout tab, and then remove fit width to content. And now it's going to utilize all available space in this group column. That's exactly what we wanted. I want some space between here, guys. So, sorry, some gap spacing. So I'm going to choose 20. And then I'm going to choose 20 here as well. Let me just think. So 20, we might not need that. Let's just choose 20 on the column. Now in terms of the height, I'm going to, on the layout tab of the left group column, I've just called it a group column, I'm going to change the vertical alignment to the top and not the stretch, because the stretch was stretching its parent height. I want the child height. Okay, guys, and then we can do the same here. So on group cards, not do the same, but I'm going to remove the min height because it's currently the minimum 200, which is too tall. So if I remove the height, it's going to, sorry, if I remove the height, it's going to fit height to content. Content is the groups within. Brilliant. So what else do we need here? Okay, so that was actually subscriptions. That's fine. We'll do subscriptions in the next one. So we're going to do subscriptions and churn. Great. So I'm going to take both of these, copy, and then I'm going to highlight group column on the right and paste. Boom. First one is subscriptions. Change to money sign. Actually, I like a card here rather. And maybe on the sales, maybe we can make this a money. Doesn't matter, guys. We're just designing here. Not important at all. And let's say subscriptions. And let's say that we had an added, I'm going to use a plus here, 912. Let's change the stats. Let's change it to a single digit. Let's say 8% from last month. Okay. I'm adding a plus here because in subscriptions, they actually can go down. If you had more churns, more unsubscribes and subscribes. Okay, and then this one will say churn. And that's going to be the chart element. This one here. Let's say minus 25. I'm going to leave that stat where it is. All right, folks, looking really, really good. Now let's look at responsive. Head over to the responsive tab. So we're currently at 992, things look great. 768, got a bit of a problem here, don't we? Definitely have a problem at 768. So let's say this. Let's say, let's go back to 992 where things look good. And let's say beneath 992 that we want to change this. Instead of 4 columns across the row, we want 2 columns on top and 2 beneath. So to achieve that, what we need to do is this particular technique. So on group column, I'm going to go to the conditional tab. I'm going to say page width, less than sign. And I'm going to find 992. Now I'm going to use the min width technique. I'm going to change percent. I'm going to change pixels to percent. I'm going to choose 100. Okay. I'm going to copy that expression. In actual fact, I'm going to right click, copy conditional expressions, and then I'm going to go to the group column on the right hand side and then paste conditional expressions. Now if I bring this down slightly, you can see it's forcing this to be 100% on its own row. Same with this. So they're dropping beneath each other. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so let's start again. So we've got 1200, looking good. 992, fine. 768, okay, great. What about 375? Oops, bit squishy again. So we need to employ a similar technique. So what we did in this particular group, we need to put them on the individual cards as well. And we're going to do that at, let's say, let's look at this number so far. What are we? I want to say beneath, I wonder if we can use a 576 breakpoint. We can. And I'm going to re-add my 576 breakpoint here. Here it is here, 576. Now why isn't that? Okay, there it is there. Let's go to 576. So at 576, I'm going to choose the page here. So under 576, there's a custom breakpoint. I also want min width 100%. And I want this on all 4 of these cards. So I'm going to right click on the card, copy conditional expressions, and then just paste on each one here. So paste special, paste conditional expressions. On the subscriptions, right click, paste conditional expressions, and the same on the churn. Paste conditional expressions. Okay, look what happens now. Boom. Breaks again. You can see we have a row gap problem here. So on the group column, I'm going to choose Layout tab. I'm going to make sure we have 20 pixels there, and then the column beneath 20 pixels. And now We're looking good, guys. We're cooking on gas. This looks absolutely stunning. Okay, let's have a look at our tables now. So we have 2-column layouts, table on the left, table on the right. The designs look absolutely identical. What I'm going to do is move the, let's think, transactions and users. Let's have a look at the anatomy quickly. So, okay, so it's definitely a group card. That's fine. Some row gap. But more importantly, we have a table, which is search for users. So we're going to need some data in the database here. We have the sticky row. There's 40 pixels. And then row number 1, 72 pixels. 2 columns, user and time that they signed up. Okay, let's do this. Let's do the group users first. So let's just neaten everything up, collapse everything in your group container, group cards. Okay, here we go, group tables. So let's start again. Let's go to the UI builder and let's go grab group, drop that in. And I'm just going to change this to a card. Change this to group users. And we need some space to work within. So I'm going to remove fit width to content. What is the width of this group? So 8. So I'm going to set this to about, just so we can design, I'm going to set that to, 380 max width. So we have some space, and then I'm going to remove fit height to content so that it fills all available space of its parent. There we go. Let's grab some text, drop that inside. I'm going to say users, and let's have a look at our heading 5 for that. So heading 5, and then I'm going to change the weight to 600. In fact, this should say users. Now I'm going to grab this text here, I'm going to copy it and then paste it inside. Here are the latest signed up users. Okay, these two, for proximity purposes, need to be in their own column container. Rename this to group header. So you can see a bit of a pattern to my naming now. On the layout tab, let's choose fit width to content and remove that. And then let's just add some gap spacing of 4. Okay, let's move on to our table element. Now, before we do that, guys, tables need data. They need option set data or they need database data. Now, if you are on a paid plan or you have taken out a trial, you can upload the CSV for users that is in the YouTube description in the assets folder, and then you can import the users. If you're on a free plan, I'm actually on a free plan, so I need to do this. You're just going to have to upload some users. So let's go ahead and see how it's done. So jump into your database and then data types, and let's add a new field to our user data type. Let's add name. That is of type text. And let's add avatar for the user's profile image. Of course, that is an image. Okay, now in app data, I'm going to upload these one by one. It's only going to take me about 60 seconds to do so. So I'm going to go to new entry. First, I'm going to upload the avatar. Head into the resources folder, look for images, and the first one we'll do is Jasmine Jones. So you can just match the person's name to their avatar file name. And then for the email, just do jasmine.jones@example.com. Just follow that pattern for the rest of them. Now, if you chose the route of using the CSV file uploader, I'm guessing you know how to do that. So I'm going to let you get on with that. And then I'm just going to manually upload these user records. Make sure that you upload the user record table first, because you actually need to reference that user table when it comes to uploading the transactions. Okay. All right, let's do the rest. I'm going to just fast forward this. So once you've done that, let's go ahead and create our transaction data type. Transaction singular, go ahead and create. And what we need for this is to reference a user. So who is making the transaction? This is a user data type. And then we need an amount. That is just going to be a number. Okay. I'm going to lowercase this. Yeah, I'm just going to choose lowercase rather. Just a naming convention. Not super important. Okay, so you can see that on the user data type, we have privacy rules applied. I'm going to click on that. And at the moment, only a user can see their own data, which means if we try load our table, nothing will show. Now for the example of this course, which is a design course, I'm going to enable a few more fields here. So for everyone else, let's enable the avatar, name, and email. Naturally, we would never show the email to everyone else. That's one of the most important pieces of data that you can collect from a user. So because this is just a design course, we're just trying to render some table views, this is why I'm doing this. But naturally, we would protect the email, okay? And then to show these three fields in a repeating group, we need to check find and searches. Okay, so in app data, let's go to transactions and let's just create 6 quick transactions. You can also upload the CSV here. You will need to match the user input with this user data type on the CSV upload. But I'm going to manually create this. I'll do the first one with you and then I'll fast forward. So I'm going to find a user. Just think of someone's name, maybe Jasmine Jones. There we go. And then just add an amount. So anything from, say, $10 to 1,000. So I'm just going to say 50. Okay, so we have 6 transactions and we have 6 users, and we can see this represented by the 6 entries. Now we can populate our tables in the front end with these entries. Let's head over to the dashboard page and let's look at users first. Let's grab a table, click once, and then drop inside the group users. So the type of content is, of course, users. And we're just going to do a search for all users. Let's sort by creation dates. Doesn't really matter, but I always like to add a sorting option. So the table direction is vertical, of course. And let's quickly review the design from the demo app. Okay, so we have horizontal separators, but not vertical separators, just horizontal. So vertical, I'm going to choose no. Horizontal, I'm going to choose my border color for consistency purposes. And on the layout tab, I'm going to remove fit width to content so it fills the available space. I'm going to remove the min height. We're going to come back. Sorry, I'm going to remove them in width and we'll come back to the min height. We need some height to work within here. Now we only need 2 columns. So let's delete column C. So we have A and B. And then click on the first row, row 0. And on row 0, on the layout tab, I want to make this a fixed height, 40 pixels. Then on the appearance tab, I want to make this row sticky so that when we scroll, this header column remains fixed in position and we can see what it is. Okay, now I want you to highlight column A and column B in the first row. I want you to go to layout and I want you to add 20 pixels left-right padding. And now we're going to go to the row 1, which is the repeating row. Much like a repeating group, we only design in this first cell. And let's make the height, this is also going to be fixed. Let's make it 72 pixels, just a creative choice, part of my design system, 4-point system. Then the row count, we're actually going to use, so we're not going to have fixed, we're going to uncheck fixed. Because if we choose fixed number of rows, it's only going to show the first 3, 4, 5, whatever we determine. But I want like an infinite scroll. And the way to do that is to uncheck repeating group rows, but then do fix the height of the element itself. So the element will be fixed, but we'll be able to scroll within the element. Let's head over to the layout tab again. We can see we've got 72 fixed height. And this is now rendering 1, 2, 3. And I want about 6 rows to be visible. So I'm going to go to the layout tab on table user. Now we're almost at 300. So let's try 600. How many rows does that get us? We're going to sort out this overlap problem in a second. That gives us about 7 rows. So what about 560 or so? Still, I can see about 7 rows. Right, first of all, click back on group container, please. And I want you to select fit height to content. And then click on, so we're just going to sort out the, then click on home, also need to fit height to content. And then click on tables, fit height to content. And then click on group users, fit height to content, and there we go. So it's fit height to content on all the parent groups. Group tables, group users, group home, fit height to content, and group container. Now we didn't start with fit height to content because there's nothing inside. Fit height to content means that we want the container to fit height to the content within. If there's nothing in, it just collapses. That's why we didn't have fit height content. We do that afterwards. Let's go back to our tables. Let's try and get a clean 6 rows in here. We're going down to 480, and that looks pretty good. 480 looks pretty good. Okay, now in column A and B, and in the first repeating group row, I want you to click Shift and highlight both of them. And let's add 20 pixels of left-right padding inside. We don't add top and bottom padding because it is a fixed height. It doesn't matter. Okay, now let's review the design. So we've got an avatar on the left, then we've got the name, email address, and then the time that they signed up. So let's grab some text. Say user in here. I'm going to make this 14 pixels and a little bit bolder, so medium 500. Then on the layout tab, I'm going to center this vertically. Great. I'm going to copy and then paste inside column B. I'm going to say time, but I want this on the right-hand side. So row 0, column B on the layout tab, I'm just going to align to the right-hand side. Now the name needs more space, right? We had a lot more information in there. We had an email address, which needs a lot more span width. So I'm going to apply a fixed width on column B. So I'm going to click on column B and I'm going to apply fixed width here. Let's try 80 to begin with, maybe a bit more space because we have padding in there, maybe 120. Okay, great. So let's grab an image, get it inside row 1. This is going to be the current row's user's avatar. And let's set a roundness. So I want this image to probably be about 40 pixels, but let's just set a roundness of 40 in case we want to increase it. On the layout tab, the width is 40, and I'm going to keep element aspect ratio fixed. Then I'm going to vertically align in the center. Lovely. Now I want a placeholder image in here so I can actually see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and upload Jasmine Jones's image. Okay, looking good. Now I'm going to grab this text here, group user, and I'm going to paste it inside. And let's dynamically insert the data from the current row's user's name. All right, and so something renders nicely. I'm going to type in a canvas placeholder of Jasmine Jones. Good stuff. Next, we need the email address. I'm just going to Command D to duplicate Jasmine Jones. Don't worry where it is now. We're going to sort out the design shortly. But I'm going to change current row's user's name to email. And then I'm going to type out her long email address. Okay, I want this to be slightly lighter, so I'm going to choose this, let's see, dark gray, or no, we can do a gray medium. Yeah, that looks good. And let's change the weight to 400 regular. Okay, now let's highlight the name and the email address, right-click, group elements in a column container. Excellent. I'm going to go to the Layout tab and remove the min height. I'm also going to change this to just group text. Now we need this to be a row distribution. So column A, row 1, it is set to a row, and this is, I think, because we've got fit width to content checked. Okay, so in group text, head back to the Layout tab and remove fit width to content. And then inside the cell, we also want some gap spacing. So let's try 8. Yeah, I like that. Okay, now for time, grab Jasmine Jones, copy, and then paste into time. And this will say current rows users, creation date, and let's format it by time. So let's just say this one here. And we're getting a preview over here, so 10:28 a.m. That's time for me currently. I'm going to just type that in here as a canvas placeholder. And on the layouts, I actually want this on the right-hand side. So I'm going to click in row 1, column B, and just right align it like that. Now click back on group users. I want to add some gap spacing between the table and the header. Let's try 20 there. Looking good. Maybe a little bit less. Let's try 16. Okay, good stuff. And just looking at this, so if I click back onto group tables, just so I can, remove the editor view here, I actually want, we've got these faint lines or dividers. I actually want time to start on the very right-hand side, user on the very left-hand side. Same with the content. So everything is neatly lined up. So what we'll do is this. Click on column A, row 0 and 1 and just remove the left padding. Set that to 0. Then do the same on column B, row 0, row 1. Looks like we can't do it. We have to do it individually. Okay, so row 0, column B, I'm going to remove the right padding. And I'm going to do the same for column B, first row, remove the right padding. That just lines up a lot more neatly now. Okay, I'm happy with that. So we're done on that part. Now we have a max width of 380. This needs to be dynamic, right? But let's first get in our table next to it. So I've highlighted group users. I'm just going to collapse everything down so we can see it neatly. There's group users there. Okay, great. I'm just going to Command D to duplicate and let's put it beneath. So before I do anything else, I'm going to rename this to group transactions. Okay, and then group tables. Okay, group tables needs to be in a row format or row layout. And let's add some gap spacing on group tables on the layout tab of 20. Let's also do this for the row, because when it comes down to mobile, these two are going to stack. All right, and now we have this empty space here. So this is where we can dynamically set the width. So highlighting both of them, remove the max width. Boom. Nice, looking good. And I can see now that we're in this particular dynamically set width that we've got too much available space for the time here. So I'm going to click back on B. I'm going to change this to 100. I'm going to do the same in this right-hand column here. Set the fixed width to 100. Okay, that allows the email to render a little bit better. You could even make the email address down to 12 if you want to. Let's have a look at that. 12. Yeah, let's do 12. Lots of space then. Okay, so these are exactly the same. Why don't we change this to transactions now, the first one? Here are your latest transactions. And we can keep that as a user. Let's just remove this image here. Delete that. And then let's change time to amount for this one. And then the amount, we just have to get from, okay, now let's change the table user to table transactions and then search for transactions. Okay. So we can actually keep this as a user. Check this out. So we can say user, and then we can say current rows transactions user. So that stays the same. And then in the amount, we just need to change this to not the creation date, but the amount, and then format it as you like. I'm going to do currency. Well, you need to do currency and USD with 2 decimal places. And then let's just make sure that we have a placeholder. I'm going to do 900. Just so I can see what it looks like. So user, amount, user, time. Cool, and then I think in the design, we had a button on the right-hand side here. So I'm going to click on button, drop that in. I'm going to say view all. And I'm just going to move it to the bottom for a second using my keyboard. And then I'm going to highlight these 2 pieces of text, right click, group elements in a column. Call this header text. Okay, let's just have a look here. So what have I done here? Give me 1 second. All right, I'm going to undo that, guys. Just undo that because I think I had what I needed. What are these issues here? Right, let's just see if I can fix this. So this is the users, current rows, transactions, users name. But why am I? No, this has gone, something's gone wrong here. I'm just going to refresh my editor here. I've got a bug. All right, sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure what happened. Okay, so let's get back to this part here where I just had added the button and we've got this row basically. So I added the button, let's see, so there's group users, there's group header. Okay, so what we need to do is this. We need to take the button and actually let's remove it outside. So it's outside of group header. So if we close group header, we can see the button. There's header, so we've got group users here on the left, then the header, then the button, then the table. Okay, so group table, group users, and let's actually rename this to group transactions. Which means the other one, which I named group transactions, needs to be group users. I apologize for this, guys. This is getting a bit confusing. Let's just break this down. So this group on the left-hand side is called group transactions. Okay, we've got this group header, then we've got the button, and then we've got the table. The table has the user and the amount. To the right of it, I've just renamed this group users. Earlier on, I named it group transactions by mistake. In there, we have our group header, and then we have our group table users. Okay, up to speed. I want to put this button on the right-hand side next to group header. So to do that, I'm going to highlight the View All button and the header. I'm going to right-click Group Elements in a Row. Okay, this is the new group header now. On the Layout tab, I'm going to remove the Fit Width to Content. There we go. Now let's design this button. So let's add a icon and label. Icon, search for an arrow. Maybe an angular arrow would make sense here, like that. And I'm going to change the roundness of this button just so it's 8. I don't like rounded buttons in dashboards. On the Layout tab, I'm going to move the arrow to the right-hand side. Okay, then I'm just going to reduce the left-right padding a touch. Square buttons or rectangular buttons need less left-right padding. That looks really good. Maybe the height can come down to 40. Yeah, I like that. Okay, guys, hopefully you got through that. Remember that you have access to my editor to look at exactly how I've set this up for this particular build. Go ahead, jump into my editor and have a look. Once we've done that, let's preview the app. Okay, we're just missing an email address for the user, but this looks pretty good. We've got a bit of extra white space here that we need to deal with, but I'm pretty happy with that. I also want to have a max width around these two elements. Let's just go back and add the email address in here. So what was the problem here? Right, that's really strange. This is definitely a bug. This should be, the data type is set to user and I'm referencing the user. But this, for some reason, is trying to grab the... Okay, fine. Click on Jasmine Jones, the text in the transactions table changes to parent group's user's name. And then beneath that, change it to parent group's users email. That's all we needed to do because we have the user data type in this group text. Okay, then up here, what I'd like to do is, so we have our floating group header, and then we have the two pieces of text inside. I want to add a container element or a group around both of these. So highlight both of them, right-click, group elements in a row container. Just rename this container. And then remove fit width to content, but do set a width of 1200. Let's just see if we have some padding here. We do. Okay. What we also need to do is set the container alignment on floating group header to be in the center as well. Let's preview. Okay, now we've got a bit more width here because we are missing our left-right padding. Would actually make more sense in the container. So let's do the following. Just in this new container we've just created, let's add 32 pixels left-right padding. Let's preview. And there you go. Nice and neatly aligned. Okay, let's have a look at mobile now. So I'm going to inspect this page. And let's go down to 1280. Things are looking good. Obviously, we need to be able to get our navigation back. We'll deal with that shortly. 768. These tables aren't looking good. Okay, we need to sort out these tables. There you go. So lots to sort out here. So let's have a look. So we have a condition on group card revenue. All right, go ahead and click that for me, please. When the current page width is smaller than 576. Okay, so currently, what is the width of one of these? 438. So at 438, it actually still looks quite good. So we can use this 576 breakpoint. So actually, let's just right-click on group card revenue, copy special, copy conditional expressions, and then click on group transactions, right-click, paste special, paste conditional expressions. Let's do the same for the group users. Right-click, paste special, paste conditional expressions. Now what we will need to do is in group tables, just make sure that we have this row gap of 20. Okay, just so when it breaks and stacks on top of each other, these two groups, that there is some space. Okay, coming down. I see what I've done here. Okay, we need to actually break these earlier. Let's go back to group transactions and let's rather choose the 992 breakpoint here. 992. And let's do the same here. 992 on group users. All right, let's try that. So my time is missing here. I need to look into that. Looks like it's missing altogether. But anyway, let's go down to 1024. Let's bring this down. 992. Yeah, looking good. Which means that 375, ignore this text at the top. We've still got some work to do on 375. But this all fits nicely. But we can create some more space. Okay. All right, let's continue refining for mobile. I'm just going to go to the responsive tab and have a look at this top bar here. So 992. But it's at 1200 that this navigation falls away. So in actual fact, it's at 1200 that we need to be able to bring this navigation back. Because if I go one beneath, then I've actually lost all of my navigation. So what I'd rather have at 1200 is a different view. I'd rather have the logo on the left and then a way to open the drawer on the left. Let's double click this element, group container. Let's add page width smaller than 1200. That's when the sidebar disappears. And we also want this to go as well. And then on the layout tab, just make sure that we have checked collapse when hidden. Okay. Let's Let's go back to the UI builder and talk about, well, what needs to happen at that particular stage. Let's make a copy of this image icon. I'm just going to Command C on my Mac. I'm going to drop it inside the floating group header. It's okay being on the right hand side, totally fine. Let's now grab an icon and just put it to the right of the logo, and then let's look for text align this icon here. So this icon will be pressed to invoke this side drawer to come out. All right, let's put that in the center as well. Now we need to group these two because we need to conditionally show these two elements. I'm going to right click, group elements in a row container. Let's call this mobile header. Okay, I'm just going to add a bit of group gap spacing so I can see what I'm working with in here. Just add the 20 and then uncheck fit width to content because it needs to fit width of whatever content is available on whichever device a user is using. All right, and then lastly, in group mobile header, we need the space between container alignment. Fantastic. So on page load, it's invisible. It's collapsed when hidden as well. When do we bring it back? Well, we bring it back on this condition here. So if this condition says, let's copy it. When the current page width is smaller than 1200, hide it. Well, then we say that it's the same expression, but that's when it is visible because it's hidden by default. Okay, let's try it. So let's just go down to our 768 breakpoint, and there we go. Go back up again. Perfect, looking good. If we scroll down, transactions are looking good. I do need to address this time here. That we'll get there in a second. But why don't we sort out the workflow to click this icon, bring back the floating group. Let's do that first. Okay, so I'm going to click on the icon we've just added here. I'm going to add a workflow. Now we're going to animate this so it feels a bit more like an app. Okay, what element are we animating? It's the floating group navigation. And now this is quite important. I want you to type no bounce for me because this gives a really nice animation. So no bounce left in. No bounce left in. And we're going to halve this duration. So let's make this around 300. Actually, maybe 400. Okay. Let's try run this workflow. And let's just go down to mobile size here, which will be used the most. Okay, if we click it, there it's coming in. If we click it again, it sort of wants to run this workflow again. So now we need the opposite. We need to be able to close it, and this icon needs to change. We also need to be able to click on home and close it as well. Okay, so back on the workflow, let's say only when floating group navigation isn't visible. That's when we're going to be animating it to open it. Now I want you to copy and paste this particular workflow. And on the second one, I want you to say is visible. When it is visible, and then instead of animating to open it, I'm going to find no bounce, left out. Duration of 400. Okay, so the other thing we need to do is just give some feedback on the design. On this icon, head over to the conditional statement. Let's change it to an X icon when the floating group is visible. So when the floating group navigation is visible, then I want the icon to be an X. And that solves that problem. Now, we also want a user to be able to click on these particular nav links to change the view, of course. So I'll show you how to do home, and then you can work on the other ones in your own time. So let's edit the workflow for home. So currently, what does home do? It changes the URL parameters. Fantastic. Let's add another step here. So a go-to page action always needs to be the last step. So let's add one in between that animates the closure from a mobile phone. So animate an element, floating group navigation. We want to no bounce left out, but only when we're on mobile. Okay, so only when page width is less than, and this needs to actually be 1200 because that's when this UI appears. Okay, so this step will only conditionally run when the page width size is less than 1200. Let's try it. So it opens, changes to an X, we click the X again, it closes. Opens again, click on home, then it closes. So we'll do the same thing for users and for the rest. Instead, we'd navigate to v equals users in the parameter. Okay, now I just want to conditionally change some of the padding as well, and that's the last thing we'll need to do. All right, we can actually create a bit more space. We can regain 16 pixels on the left, 16 pixels on the right. Let's head back to the design and let's have a look at the group container. Okay, so at the moment, this group container on the layout tab has 32 pixels left-right padding, 64 top, 32 bottom. Let's adjust some of this. And I really only want to do this below 576, okay? So let's copy this first expression and paste it below, and then adapt this to 576. And then let's bring up all of the padding. So top, bottom, left, right. Okay, so some of this reorganized itself. Okay, so the bottom is now the first one. So let's say, so 32 on the bottom is fine. Let's change the top to 32 and then left, right, 16 and 16, because we want to maximize the real estate on the mobile phone. We don't have a lot of screen space to work with. We did this in the previous part for the marketing page. We'll do the same for the dashboard. Okay, now that I've done that, let's preview the page at 375. And voila, this looks a lot better. Okay, less space here, but very nice and even on the left-hand side. And the table elements we can see nicely. It's also possible to set up a scroll animation. For this, we need a min width value, which we're not going to cover on this course. But you can actually set this up so that the group stays the same width, just as it does now, and you can scroll in these individual cells. Let's just sort out the time, guys, and then we're done. So what's the problem down here? So if I click on users, current rows users creation date, and this is because of privacy rules. So if I head back to the data and then privacy and I click on user, we just need to check the creation date. Now don't forget to come back if you are building an app, come back and remove this stuff, okay? The public should not be able to see other people's data unless it's, for instance, a social media app, which then would set up more advanced privacy rules to be able to show a person's name, their avatar, their posts, that kind of thing. But just remember that user data is very, very important and most of the time private. Okay, guys, give this one more check. Okay, we've got our time back, 375 breakpoint. We can navigate, there we go. Bit of space here, yep, that works. One more tweak I'm going to do is on the user table, I'm just going to change this email address down to 12 pixels. Now, if you want to continue on from here, what I would do is just set up some dashboard styles. Okay, so I've overridden the body here. I would have this to like maybe dash title, and then we could have a dash email or dash body small, But because I'll be using these values quite a lot, I probably would go ahead and set up some styles here. But this course is getting a little bit long, so I'd like to stop here. And guys, do me a favor, in the comments below, please let me know how you felt about this course. If there's anything else you'd like to learn, lots more courses are coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you some good foundational knowledge for designing in Bubble. And I'll see you in the next course.